Hi everyone, my name is Ala and I will be presenting our group's infographic on e-cigarettes. It is titled Everything You Need to Know, E-Cigarettes. And we started off with kind of a definition with a section titled What is an e-cigarette? So e-cigarettes and vape devices are handheld devices designed to deliver emissions for inhalation by heating a solution that commonly contains nicotine, a humectant, and flavoring chemicals. Here we can see an image of a person smoking an e-cigarette, which I think would really catch someone's attention, especially someone who uses these products. Next, we have what's in an e-cigarette. So as a lot of us know, e-cigarette companies often advertise e-cigarettes as only containing nicotine, some kind of humectant, and flavoring chemicals. And humectants are chemicals used to maintain moisture and add flavor. Propylene glycol and vegetable glycerine are some of the main humectants used, and although both are generally recognized as safe for ingestion, there is little evidence about their safety for long-term inhalation. Going back to the flavoring chemicals, they are really good at attracting younger people because they often have kind of fun and creative names that just make e-cigarettes sound less harmful. However, as we can see over here, these products also contain toxicants, ultrafine particles, and carcinogens, which are all known to cause negative health effects. Next, we have some statistics on e-cigarette use. A study done in 2019 reported that 27% of high school students use e-cigarettes, and pretty surprisingly, this study also reported that e-cigarettes account for 90% of nicotine dependence. Another fact that they found from this study was that 90% of adult cigarette smokers began smoking before the age of 18 years. So what this means is that a lot of high schoolers who use e-cigarettes may end up smoking cigarettes as adults. So these e-cigarettes are really good at kind of getting kids hooked onto nicotine at an early age and essentially making sure that they continue using nicotine through adulthood. Lastly, we have some health risks in e-cigarette users. These stats on respiratory disease, chronic bronchitis, asthma, and COPD were from a study comparing current e-cigarette users versus non-users. So we will start off with COPD. COPD is a chronic inflammatory lung disease causing obstructed airflow from the lungs, and there is a 57% higher incidence of COPD in e-cigarette users. Next, we look at respiratory disease. There is a 31% higher incidence of respiratory disease in e-cigarette users. Next, we look at asthma. So asthma is a respiratory condition that occurs when someone's airways narrow, swell, and produce mucus, making it hard to breathe. There is a 31% higher incidence of asthma in e-cigarette users. Next, we look at chronic bronchitis, which is long-term inflammation of bronchial tubes, which results in mucus buildup in them, and there is a 33% higher incidence of chronic bronchitis in e-cigarette users. Next, we look at emphysema, which is a shortness of breath caused by damaged alveoli, and there is a 69% higher incidence of emphysema in e-cigarette users. Lastly, myocardial infarction is literally a heart attack. Heart attacks occur when blood flow to the heart is blocked, and there is a 55.8% higher incidence of heart attacks in e-cigarette users. And this myocardial infarction stat came from a study analyzing data containing information on e-cigarette users versus non-users. And this last part hopefully would attract the attention of, again, somebody who uses these products and may help them realize how much these products can be affecting their health. And yeah, that is our infographic. Thank you for watching.
Good morning. My name is Alex Awad.
And my name is Karina Tran.
And we will be presenting on behalf of Group 4. Today, we're going to be talking about how nicotine and tobacco companies in particular have targeted marginalized and vulnerable populations. In doing so, these companies have established a solid customer base and the future of their corporation with heavy monetary gain, despite inflicting a terrible injustice to the public health. To sum up our lecture, here are the key points and objectives that we're going to discuss. We'll start off with the history of tobacco use, delving a little deeper and adding on to what we've already learned in class. We'll transition into types of nicotine and tobacco products available for commercial use, and then from there go on to discussing advertisement strategies employed by tobacco companies that have been shown to specifically target vulnerable and marginalized populations, such as those with lower socioeconomic status and certain races. Finally, we'll wrap it up with barriers faced when attempting to quit tobacco use, difficulties that are reinforced and exacerbated by the various health disparities already experienced by these communities. Beginning with the history of tobacco use. Tobacco is obtained from the genus Nicotine plant and is indigenous to North and South America. Archaeological studies have proposed that the usage of tobacco first appeared in the Maya civilization of Central America, and with the migration of the Mayans, tobacco spread down south of America and was adopted by other native tribes. When tobacco was first introduced to American society, it was used in medicine, but the health hazards associated with the drug weren't very well known at the time. Tobacco was used for treatment of diseases and other ailments such as asthma, ear aches, bowel problems, fever, sore eyes, depression, and burns. Migration from Europe to North America played a major role in the origin and spread of tobacco around the world. With the migration of these communities came the increase in access to tobacco. There was instant popularity in Europe because of the so-called healing properties tobacco had. However, during the early 17th century, it became more well known that there were harmful effects linked to tobacco. Yet this increase in awareness did not reduce the popularity and use of tobacco in the community and are still used by a large number of people around the world today. The use of tobacco only increased, becoming a major product in the US around the 1900s and continues to be until this day. Tobacco companies have transformed their products in various ways, such as differences in their packaging, tobacco and nicotine percentage in the products, addition of harmful chemicals, and methods of use. The way nicotine products has been used has also changed over time. Products advertised were used in pipes, cigars, and snuff, which caused the growth and consumption of tobacco products to increase tremendously. Their marketing strategies have also changed in regards to how they target their potential consumers with advertisements. Moving on to the types of nicotine products. So tobacco products have evolved from conventional cigarettes to newer products such as electronic cigarettes and heated tobacco products. There are two types of nicotine-containing products categorized into non-combustible and combustible products. Non-combustible tobacco products do not require burning of the product for consumption. Combustible tobacco products include cigarettes, cigars, and cigarillos and involve the burning of tobacco as well as producing ash and smoke. The four types of non-combustible products are listed on this slide, and beginning with vaping products, they do not contain tobacco, but rather have nicotine, which is derived from tobacco and is then added to an e-liquid. An e-liquid is a substance that is vaporized into an aerosol when it's drawn, so therefore it does not produce ash or smoke. Heated tobacco products have loose leaf tobacco that is heated with an electronic heating element. This product reaches a specific temperature range that does not burn the tobacco, but still allows access to the nicotine. There are also smokeless tobacco products that include chewing tobacco, snuff, and snus. These are either chewed, sucked on, or can be sniffed. Lastly, oral nicotine products, including gum, tablets, and patches, are either chewed, dissolved, or absorbed into the body through the skin.
Now moving on to advertising and how tobacco companies have targeted vulnerable populations. Because tobacco and nicotine has become one of the major products being used in the United States, Advertising has become a way tobacco companies have altered their marketing strategies to promote and maintain the popularity of their products. The target audience of these advertisements are minorities who make up the majority of consumers. These people include those of lower socioeconomic status, young adults, LGBTQ plus community, and racial ethnic groups such as African Americans and Latinos. Individuals from these groups have higher smoking rates. Studies have demonstrated there are more tobacco advertisements in lower socioeconomic communities compared to higher ones, with ethnically tailored campaigns as well. High use of these ethnic specific models compared to white models in these ads are utilized in a way that's more appealing to these groups of people. Advertising has been designed to appeal to these specific groups in order to increase the market of consumers. However, the tobacco industry has also utilized this as an opportunity to have these individuals support policies that benefit the industry by reducing control of tobacco. So addition of these ads are meant to gain environmental support in these communities, and that should affect policy in controlling their consumption. These advertisements impact the perception the consumers have on the product and influence the individual's decision to use them. Thus, it's important to note that the use of these advertisements and the deliberate placing of campaigns where tobacco companies choose to advertise their merchandise manages to change the perception individuals have on these products. The tobacco industry has focused their attention on minority communities, which is especially seen in their TV advertisements for e-cigarettes. The use of TV ads has increased in recent years, and studies have shown that their effects have been consistent amongst various groups. This increased exposure for e-cigarette advertising has resulted in the increased use of e-cigarettes in consumers, such as adolescents. E-cigs are being advertised as less addictive, and they have fewer health risks compared to combustible tobacco products and are supposedly aiding with reduction of withdrawal symptoms from the abstinence of conventional cigarettes. However, studies have shown that's not the case, and this is why many adolescents are curious to try e-cigs because they believe it's less harmful than the conventional cigarette and other tobacco products. It's also why many cigarette smokers attempt to switch to using e-cigarettes as a way to stop smoking the conventional one. Menthols are a highly addictive variant of the traditional cigarette, as the presence of menthol causes an increase in the uptake of nicotine and is a main tool of marketing to minority populations by tobacco companies. Women, African Americans, and Latino populations smoke menthols at a higher rate than their white peers and show higher rates of addiction as well as lower quitting rates than those who smoke traditional cigarettes, despite smoking fewer menthols per day on average. In smokers, cigarette ads have indicated a positive association with craving and impulse purchases, which would be detrimental to the cessation or quitting of smoking. Increased rates of reported exposure to ads was correlated with an increased likelihood to begin smoking, as well as higher purchase and higher impulse purchase rates. African American populations are the only ones that experience differential advertising, with tobacco companies purchasing more ad space in Black-owned publications, as well as being the highest ethnicity to appear in cigarette ads other than white people. The ad shown here is for Newports, which is the brand of menthol most commonly used by African American populations and is an example of the differential advertising mentioned earlier. Many flavored forms of traditional cigarettes have been banned due to their increased rates of nicotine addiction. And most recently, the Biden administration has banned the use of menthol, which may decrease the disproportionate use of nicotine products in these marginalized groups. E-cigarettes are commonly used amongst high school and college-age students and often seen as less risky than other substances of abuse, which could possibly contribute to their higher use rate at younger ages, leading to development of addiction later on in life. Unlike traditional cigarettes, there is no significant sex difference in the use of electronic cigarettes, and these devices are commonly used and seen as a tool of social gatherings. Another main appeal of the e-cigarette is the ability to be discreet. It's more compact than a pack of cigarettes and circumvents the issue of smell, as well as having a similar addictive quality of taste, which is comparable to menthols. An increased rate of electronic cigarette use has been observed amongst Latino and Asian American groups, especially compared to that of their white peers. Over half of youth that are teenage and college age who initiate cigarette use via the e-cigarette are Hispanic. And Hispanic populations are also 3 times as likely to initiate using e-cigarettes than any other minority group. As a result, e-cigarettes have been shown as a gateway or a transition to use of the conventional cigarette, especially amongst the younger populations. Youth who are exposed to stressful external environments or exposed to drug use and dependence are also more likely to initiate e-cigarette use. And now we're going to finish up with barriers to cessation. So remember, that's stopping of smoking. Populations of minorities in marginalized communities are disproportionately affected by barriers and passages for drug use. Barriers are blocks in access to healthcare and other services in aiding drug use and addiction, while passages are means that enable the use and abuse of drugs within a population. Beginning with barriers that marginalized communities face, less health education on the negative effects and limited access to quality healthcare services in marginalized communities can affect the ability to cope with addiction. Minorities are more likely to experience race-related stressors as well as a result of social stigmatization, but these effects are poorly studied. Racial discrimination in mental health has also biased treatment and resources to help mitigate stress in these populations. As a result, marginalized communities are unable to attain the same quality treatment as more privileged populations. Again, passages or means of enabling the abuse are observed in marginalized communities. POC communities tend to have significantly larger amounts of liquor stores and smoke shops, increasing access to nicotine products and other drugs of abuse. Cultural norms and attitudes that revolve around kinship through sharing, as well as the idea that smoking is important to identity development, can promote tobacco use, especially in Indigenous and younger populations. Hispanic and people from multi-ethnic backgrounds are also more likely to make attempts at quitting smoking than whites. Despite this, attempts to quit smoking don't always correlate to smoking cessation, which is the abstinence of smoking completely for a variety of reasons. Studies have shown that there is differential variability in a multitude of factors across these racial groups. It was also previously mentioned that smoking is used to manage stress, and increased exposure to stress leads to relapse, making quitting much more difficult in minority populations. There is also lower use of cessation aids in non-white populations, which are things like nicotine patches, gum, lozenges, and stuff like that. This is due to many factors, including greater costs, especially behaviorally and pharmacologically. However, adherence is also an important factor to consider when looking at medication to aid cessation. In general, there is a lack of research and data conducted on ethnic and minority groups. A lot of the research available often calls for further examination of the issue in the context of specific minority groups. Due to this gap in knowledge and the already observed disproportionate access to vital resources, it is necessary to emphasize further exploration of the injustices that minorities and marginalized groups face in our society and around the world. With this, we would like to thank you for listening to our presentation, and we will now be accepting questions.